Justice and Mercy International exists to make justice personal for the poor, the orphan, and the forgotten people of the world. And we primarily work in two countries. We work in the Amazon region of Brazil, and we work in Eastern Europe in a small country called Moldova.
Our organization exists here in the Amazon to educate, encourage, equip, and serve the river people along the Amazon River. And we do that mainly through jungle pastors who are ministering all over the jungle in regions that most of us will never get to.
In Moldova, we work with pastors in a pastor's conference setting, but we also work with local churches in the villages where we have child sponsorship and transitional living sponsorship.
Our priority is bringing the love of Jesus to people. Whether we go to villages to visit the children we help, or whether they come to us to live in transitional living homes.
In Moldova, we're trying to raise up a group of leaders from inside that can stay in the country and can have jobs and can provide for themselves and their families and really begin to change the culture in Moldova.
Breaking news. The first death from coronavirus here in the United States.
Now to growing concerns about the deadly coronavirus officially hitting the U.S. Here's what we know.
Unwelcome but expected, the coronavirus has hit the UK.
What we know is that it's spreading. That's not really a surprise. What we don't know is a lot about this virus.
Brazil, which is marking its deadliest day from coronavirus since the start of this pandemic. For the first time, the country's daily death toll reached 1,000 people.
The news began to get in Brazil in the beginning of March, and very soon things in the southeast began to close, and quickly the Amazon had the first case, and both in Manaus, and then it began to spread in the jungle in one town, second town, third town. And in a month and a half, this virus was all over this state. I remember thinking, well, thank God it's only in one municipality. And next thing we hear, there's another and another and another. And villages calling, like here in the Negro River, saying, Sarah, we have like 15 cases here. We have people with symptoms. 2 people died. And a pastor crying on the phone saying, I don't know what to do. This is terrifying. Like, what do we do?
We were very concerned about the families and the children we work with. They were very vulnerable before, but after the lockdown, their life became harder. We were concerned about the food and hygienic supplies because these things are more needy.
Because of the COVID-19 and our country, during this time was very hard to live. I saw people who really need help from our organization. I saw that people didn't have shoes, kids didn't have shoes. There were kids very dirty, the houses was very old, or some of the kids didn't have food or sugar in the house, so that made me very sad.
We had to cancel all the summer camps that we had previously, and this was very sad news for us, for the children, because we were eager to see them and they were eager to see us, and we missed the time of fellowship and loving on each other, hugging and playing together.
The rivers were closed, no boats were coming or going. We were isolated at home ourselves. Like, the virus was taking over this region. It was such a difficult season, especially in the villages, because you do realize that the concept of viruses, bacteria, like those things, they have no knowledge of it. They have no experience with it. And it's an unfair fight.
When all our sponsorship meetings were canceled, we tried to keep in touch with every family and every child through the phone. We called them weekly and asked about their health, about their family, about their needs, and how the things are doing. We couldn't imagine there are so many families, vulnerable children, poor children, who need help, who need food and clothes, shoes, any help.
Jungle pastors were no different. They would call and say, our pantry is completely empty, but I'm not even calling for me. I'm calling because my village doesn't have any food. Can you guys send them food?
The news of COVID-19 was a big surprise for us, as I guess for everybody else. And at first it was a shock. For a day or two, we had to stop, pray, and ask for guidance from our God, the Father. Then the staff gathered and we came up with a plan of action.
When everything stopped, we truly just paused. We canceled, we postponed all of our calendar, and we looked up to God.
One of the things that we found right at the very beginning of COVID was that people were hungry.
And we did not have money in reserve for a feeding program. We had money in reserve for our normal sponsorship program, for our pastors' conferences. But the U.S. staff, as we sat and we prayed and we heard about these needs, we began to immediately say, we know that we need to feed people. God talks a lot in His Word about how He identifies with the poor, that what you do for the least of these, you do for me. You know, if you see me hungry and you fed me, you saw me without clothes and you clothed me. So before we had a dime in our hand, before anybody had given anything, we went ahead and gave the go-ahead for Sarah and Alina to begin finding out where we needed to deliver emergency food bags. And as we delivered emergency food bags, the money began to come in. And it was just a reminder to me of God's heart for the least of these. He took care of the poor first.
I am still amazed with the amount of commitment and generosity that people from the States, from Brazil, from different places in the world that quickly said, we want to be part of it.
We started delivering food bags. The news spread very quickly, and families just started contacting us on social media. Pastors, mayors, social assistants contacted us and asked for help. And I know that for most people, COVID time was a time of depression, of decline. Well, for God's ministry, it was a time of growth.
I just want to say that JMI really changed our ministry in this pandemic time. Before, we was working just in 3 villages, and all other villages has no Christian people. And we was praying for many years, and we really would like to start in other 4 villages. There's about like 5,000 people, and we was praying about these people to share a gospel, and we didn't know how to do that. We just gave this in the hands of God. When JMI called us with these food bags, and we say, wow, this is a time and we need to go, and this is in this pandemic time we start to do their ministry. When we gave these food bags and hygienic supplies, they was very pleased, and they say like they was shocked that somebody came and helped them, and most of them even just wanted them to listen this time because they was very lonely. JMI reached people with not just with food bags and hygienic supplies, but also the hope.
People were hungry. People, they couldn't go anywhere, they couldn't find food. So very quickly, our staff gathered. We began to stack like food bags, hygiene items, cleaning items for their homes, an encouragement letter in a food bag, not only with encouragement, but with information about COVID and how they would go about and how to prevent it, how to deal with if they had symptoms. But also, we were able to put a New Testament in it as a word of encouragement for them in such an isolated and lonely season. And it was amazing to see the joy and how they understood God's presence through that. Knowing that God had not forgotten them, know that He was still the provider for them, that even if the world stops, that God will never stop loving them.
Pastor Luis is one of the partners that we have in our sponsorship program. When I heard that the river were being shut down and people that worked on boats were getting out of jobs, I worried about Pastor Luis and many other pastors because I knew he would not be able to work through all those months. So I reached out to him to ask if he was needing for something, and he was very emotional.
Nessa pandemia, Eu não recebi telefonema nenhum de ninguém, a não ser da JMA. Vocês que ligaram, perguntaram como estava. A gente saber que alguém se preocupou com a gente, né? Numa cidade isolada, é muito maravilhoso. Parabéns para vocês, viu? Vocês chegaram em primeiro lugar.
The help that JMI was able to bring through the basic foods and goods and medication, I don't think we would ever be able to measure what that meant for those people at that time.
Quando chegou a cesta básica e quando você entregava ali uma casa, dizia, pastor, chegou na hora certa, nós não tínhamos mais nada, porque a gente queria um ministério, às vezes, voltado só para ganhar alma, mas a gente esquece que o ser humano precisa comer. Jesus sempre, ele deu de comer às pessoas no deserto e não deixou passar fome. E isso daí, para mim, marcou muito, me alegrou muito, vamos dizer, me restaurou também, não só eu. Cada casa que eu chegava, quando eu dava uma cesta básica para uma criança, ela enxergava um pacote de leite, leite, bolacha, né? É muito gratificante você ver uma criança sorrir. Pensa como isso é gratificante pra gente, saber que você foi útil na vida daquela família, né? Então isso daí foi coisas que marcaram o meu ministério. E agradeço muito a Deus por vocês existirem.
We saw the Brazilian government tap Sarah to not only help with the feeding program in and around Manaus and in the state of Amazonas, but she became in charge of the entire northern part of Brazil, the government feeding program for the entire northern part of Brazil. Our staff began making connections with other NGOs that could help distribute that food. We had mayors calling our office in Moldova asking for help because they knew that we had provided for kids in their villages. We had social workers that we've worked with that were helping. We had a mayor who was actually posting on Facebook and thanking us for the work that we've done in their village.
One of the exciting things that's happened as a result of this pandemic, and it reaffirms the fact that God takes something bad and turns it into something good. And that's what he's done in our ministry in the Amazon and in Moldova. We have been able to distribute gospel resources, hundreds and hundreds of gospel resources, Bibles to those in need. We've made greater connections with people on the ground, with families that have never heard about the good news of Jesus.
So during this global pandemic, we were able to really see how we made justice personal. We were able to deliver food when people were hungry. We were able to teach them about the virus and how to protect themselves.
One of the things that God really affirmed in JMI was that our model of equipping and empowering national indigenous leaders was the right thing for us to do, because we have staff on the ground in Moldova and in Brazil that are working 365 days a year.
Sometimes hardship is what tests us, and it's what proves what's true and helps you frame things differently. God has used and allowed something really hard in our world this year, but he's used it for our good, and he's taught us many, many things. We've seen God move and do things that we would have never believed were possible. And in the middle of a global economic shutdown, and he continues to work, and he continues to push the gospel out. And we are so thankful that we just are able to be part of what he's doing. We were able to jump in, and we were able to do it. And we did it because we had partners all over the world who were willing to lean into this with us. Our staff on the ground, but all of the people who are the part of the JMI family who helped make it possible.
We're told, how will they know that we are Christians? Well, they'll know us, the scriptures tell us, by our love for one another. And that's exactly what we found to be the case in our work in Moldova and the Amazon.